Well, what does it look like to live a life worth following, especially for a man? Well, today I am so pleased and we are just so honored to have Fran Sirianni, his sons Mike, Jay, and Nick with us as they talk to us a little bit about their quests for manhood and how they kind of learn principles from their fathers, those same principles that they're now trying to teach to their children. You know, in our culture, defining authentic manhood is really difficult because really we don't see many clear definitions in our postmodern culture. In other cultures, there are ceremonies and places, times where people can publicly declare when a boy becomes a man. However, in our culture, a boy rarely, if ever, really experiences a ceremony when he knows that he's taken that step to become a man. Why? Well, I don't know, but I'm guessing that few people really even know how to define manhood, let alone be able to definitively declare when their son has entered into that fraternity. You know, Theodore Roosevelt once said, "We need the iron qualities that go with true manhood. We need the positive virtues of resolution, of courage, of indomitable will, of power to do without shrinking the rough work that must always be done." You know, in order to incorporate these iron qualities and virtues, we ultimately need a source of strength to help us establish those steps. A navigator, a compass even, a solid role model. And that role model starts with the one who taught us really what it means to be a man, and that is Jesus Christ. And as we observe the life of Jesus, we're really able to kind of break man's responsibilities into three pieces: the will to obey, a woman to love, and a work to do. Jesus fulfilled the will of his Father. He laid down his life for his bride, the church, and he finished the work that he came to do at the cross. So Fran, I want to start with you, and then I'm going to let your sons kind of answer this in whatever order they want to. But how would you tell us a little bit about how your father kind of prepared you for manhood?
Well, as I think back, my dad was he was one of the great generation. He was a veteran. You know, he grew up during the Great Depression, so he developed his values, I think, from his parents, and he instilled those onto us. You know, he was a loving father, but he was also a businessman and was really dedicated to his business. But also he was a community activist and just did a lot of things with the community in Kane where we grew up. But he was always there to listen. He was just a great guidance for us as we grew up. You know, really stressed the importance of a good education, and you know, beyond the question of a doubt, his work ethic was an example for us as we grew up.
Guys, I know your dad's here, but if you could kind of elaborate kind of on how your dad kind of prepared you for manhood.
Well, I think one thing that is pretty striking in our situation is that you know, my dad's a teacher, he's a coach. We all followed that path, right? So, you know, we all went into education. We found our way to coaching, and that's the path we chose to follow because it was so rewarding for him. It's rewarding for us. And that stress, I mean, he stressed, and my mom and my dad, our family stressed education, and we saw the value in education. And it was something that we wanted to be part of. And we followed different paths, but we're still in the same, you know, we're still doing the same things when it comes to, you know, teaching and coaching and being part of other people's lives and trying to model what we were taught to our athletes and to our students.
Mike or Nick, what would you add to that? How do you feel like your father kind of prepared you for manhood?
I agree with you. I mean, it's very unique that we all are doing kind of the same profession. You know, I remember, I mean, Nick might not remember this as much, but I remember going to football practice all the time and you know, always being around and, you know, just, you just to be around your dad is pretty special. Even though he had to work and had late practices, we were still able to be there. Sometimes we got in a little bit of trouble while we were there, but we were there. And I think that's, especially nowadays when fathers aren't there a lot, with work and with other things, I think it was very unique that we were able to be around through his work. And I think that's a big reason we all chose this field.
Yeah, I've just seen just how much he's been there for us, and kind of preparing you for manhood as far as the, being there for your loved ones. I can't remember a game that he missed or a practice that we were late to or anything like that. And I'm talking games everywhere, just game and no matter where we played, no matter what his schedule was. And then just even when we're in different parts of the country, when I lived in California, just the phone calls, like we're a 3-hour difference on phone calls, and I could have a bad day, and I could call him up at my schedule ending at 11 o'clock, him being at 2 in.the morning, and him just answering the phone like nothing was going on. Oh, hey, what's going on? And, that, and then, or, not just bad days, but good days too, that I wanted to share with him. And so, that started when we were young. Obviously it was with everything. And then, it translated, and then it just makes me think of how, a man's supposed to be there for his family, and how a great example of that.
Well, years ago, I benefited from the teaching of a man named Reverend Robert Lewis, who really offered the first real definition of what it means to be a man. And I want to just kind of briefly share how he defined manhood. The first thing he said is that a real man rejects passivity. And kind of an example of how Jesus modeled this was, as Jesus was preparing for his earthly vocation, he went into the wilderness for 40 days. He fasted, he was seeking the heart of his heavenly Father. And when he was tempted, just as Adam was, he didn't give in, but he instead rejected passivity, and he carried out the vision that he was given by God instead of the vision of someone who was just playing to his ego. The second piece of this definition is that a real man accepts responsibility. Jesus was given the task to be a suffering servant. And even when in the garden, in the midst of temptation, at the hardest time arguably in his life, he was desiring to have this cup of suffering or this experience of going to the cross taken away. He didn't really want to do it. You can't really blame him. But at the end of the day, he just said to God, he said, Heavenly Father, your will be done, not mine. The Apostle Paul, in his letter to Titus, challenged him to raise up this kind of man. Here's what he said: in the same way, encourage the young men to live wisely, and you yourself must be an example to them by doing good works of every kind. Let everything you do reflect the integrity and seriousness of your teaching. Teach the truth so that your teaching can't be criticized. Then those who oppose us will be ashamed and have nothing bad to say about us. Well, the third part of this definition is that a real man leads courageously. While facing the threats of powerful men, Jesus demonstrated his love and leadership by willingly going to the cross for you and me so that he could lay down his life for his bride, the church. The fourth part of this definition says that a real man expects God's greater reward. You see, Jesus really expected a greater reward, the reward that God had planned for him. In fact, we read about that plan in Scripture, where it says, therefore God elevated him, Jesus, to the place of highest honor and gave him the name above all other names, that at the name of Jesus every knee would bow and every tongue would confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. See, Jesus' life compels us to step up and be men who reject passivity, men who accept responsibility, men who lead courageously, and men who trust God for the greatest of all rewards. And I'm convinced that the world is in great need of authentic men, and our families are desperately looking for that kind of leadership in their home. So guys, how did those 4 components play a part in your individual quests for manhood? And even how so in the raising of your children?
Well, I think, through those components, I mean, we're talking about manhood, and here on this day, we're talking about fathers, but you're talking about leadership. Yeah. And all those things are coming down to leadership. And it's not necessarily, we're not expected, all of us, to be leader of a congregation, or a leader of a team, or a leader of a city, a state, a school district, or anything like that. We're expected to be leaders of the people that we are responsible for. And for us as fathers, that's our families. So if you're putting other people before you, if you are accepting that responsibility, if you are humble enough to understand the big picture of what the goal is, as opposed to getting your own reward, you can lead a family. You could lead a team. You could lead, a construction site. I mean, that's what leadership truly is. So we are equating, and I'm going to learn a lot here from today, just talking this out. But I guess what we're learning here is that manhood is about leadership, and again, it's not about being the loudest person. It's about leading through example and that model that Christ started. With that model for us, but we are getting from our fathers, hopefully getting from our fathers. I know I have, and hopefully I can do that for my children.
I mean, you said, I heard the word courageous, and, this is probably going to be brought up. I don't know, maybe not, but, obviously everyone here knows that our dad was sick with cancer, and I was the oldest at the time. And, I don't even know how much Nick remembers of the first time, that this happened, and how he attacked that and was courageous through his battle. And I think he obviously wanted to beat it so he could be here for his family and like Jay said, lead us. And then, the second time, I remember the second time that the diagnosis came, I was in college. And they didn't want to tell me because I was in the middle of a football season. Actually, I never even talked about this to my dad, but I remember the day. It was at Heidelberg in 1992. At Heidelberg in 1992. I think it was at Heidelberg. Might have been somewhere else. It might have been my sophomore year too. Now that I'm thinking, I'm getting old. I can't remember. But it was in 1992 or 1991, and they told me in a game. I think it was Heidelberg, and they wanted to keep it from me. And I'm like, well, why would you do it? We didn't want to bother you with this. So in terms of courageous, I heard that word. I wanted to touch on that because to me that was, to fight, to want to be there for your family, and to be, like Jay said, a leader to us. And one of my favorite quotes is in our football locker room is leadership is demonstrated, not announced. Now, yeah, of course, we all know that my dad announced his leadership to us many loud times. Probably me the most, but I could handle it. I don't know if the other two could. But he also demonstrated his leadership through like I said, through the courageous battle that he fought.
I think about the first point you said, the reject passivity, and we were taught that, again, like Mike just said, not because my dad announced it, because he practiced it. I can think of so many times where something wasn't right, something wasn't going on right, and he addressed it. I can think of maybe guys in a weight room not using good language, and him, or at a movie theater, guys not using good language, and him correcting that response in front of us, or someone being mistreated and him stepping in, or a bunch of our friends or my friends going to a movie that wasn't the type of movie I should have been watching, and him saying, "You're not, well, they're going, but you're not going." So I would, that when you said that, and then, you know, that really struck there, just thinking about all the times. Maybe I can remember a time that I found a $20 bill, and instead of putting it in my pocket, it was returned, and the right thing was done, just over and over and over again, saying just so much as saying hello to somebody in the street. I mean, when there was something wrong going on, he addressed it. And then the other thing, just about leading courageously, I felt like we were led by the Bible. My dad taught us the importance of the Bible and church, and that's where, you know, when a leader like our dad leads through the example of Christ, there's no better one to follow. So, and just thinking about loving, you know, he loved us. He always loves us and shows us that and leads through that. And then also shows us how to love other people through some of the things, you know, through many different ways. You know, I can think of so many times where he was involved with the church, of, you know, just helping people out, or involved in leading and showing us involved in pro-life protests, or helping people with cancer, you know, and he just loves other people in front of us, and that has no choice but to rub off on us and show us how to lead. Because leading to me is, there's a lot of different definitions, but the core of it and start of it is, you know, loving each other, and that we got. And in the time that we're going through in our country right now, you know, man, we were just taught that just at an early age, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, when I think back of what my dad, you know, as far as his leadership qualities were concerned, when he came back from the war, I'm a baby boomer, so, you know, I was born after the war, and I think he was in his early 40s maybe when I was growing up. But, you know, he wasn't, because of his job and because of his age, not that 40 years old is old, but, you know, he never played catch and that kind of stuff. You know, he came home from work, he was, you know, at home and wanted to be at home. We'd talk and things like that, but he was never one that kind of pushed his ways on his family. He always instilled on us the values of being a strong Christian. You know, we went to church every Sunday, and, you know, my Nana was a true prayer warrior. Right? She didn't just say the rosary, she wore out the rosary beads. I mean, that's the kind of example that we got from her. But, you know, as I think of as I progressed into being a dad, I took the values that he gave to me, and I tried to instill them into the guys. You know, we wore out the side of our yard, you know, playing ball and those kinds of things. But, you know, it was hopefully the values that I got from my dad, we passed on to the kids. You know, that's an important. And my wife, her family and her upbringing is very similar to mine. You know, her dad was a veteran and a Depression era guy, and so the mom. And so those values just kind of moved along with us, and hopefully moved on to them. Yeah.
Well, guys, can you think of a time in your life when you felt like, now I'm a man, and I don't, maybe you can, maybe you can't, but if you can, kind of what was it that kind of got you to that place where you felt like, hey, I've stepped into this fraternity now of manhood?
You know, it's one of those things, I mean, that, like, I'm learning just a lot in this last 20 minutes, because I've never really thought about that. You know, maybe it just happens where you start to realize that you have accepted responsibility and you've accepted this maturity, and you're making decisions that are impactful, not just for you, but for other people. I think that is when you realize the awesome weight of your, you know, your impact, really. So, you know, I can't think of one moment. You know, Mike talked about, you know, my dad in his fight with cancer, and we, all three of us, experienced that in different ways. And I think that that's part of the foundation of what got us to manhood. But I can't say, for an example, this was the moment, you know, scoring your first touchdown, catching your first fish, which for Nick, what was that for you? Like 3 weeks ago? So,
Same
you know,
time
I mean,
Jacobs was.
So, you know, I mean, so I can't just give an exact moment. I just think it's a process, and I think that there are times that I struggle with that as a 45-year-old. You know, and I know my son's watching. I know my daughters are watching, and you know, it's hard. It's hard, but I just think it's an overall process. You know, you listen to my grandfather, who, you know, is part of the greatest generation, and then my dad, who's a baby boomer, myself and Mike, who are Generation X, and there's Nick, who's like a millennial. I mean, we cover so many generations there. The virtues stay the same. Just the illustration of what those look like just change a little bit with the times. But the virtues, the integrity, the characteristics are same about being a man. It just looks a little bit different from generation to generation.
See, I do have, I mean, I have a month span. I mean, I'm not saying a college freshman is not a man. Believe me, because I deal with college freshmen a lot. But I got dropped off at college, and I didn't know anyone, no one. I've never been to Ohio besides the visit. I didn't know anyone at the school. And they kind of just kicked me out of the car, and I stood in the middle of the field, and they left. And I remember calling home, and this has helped me with my job too, because I deal with freshmen that are homesick. And then I had a daughter this year as a freshman in college that was so homesick. And I remember just the constant talks. It's going to get better. You know, you're there to make friends. And I just remember the constant, you know, I don't even realize if anyone knows how homesick I was. And then there was a time when, you know, I remember, you know, a month later during this, I called home, and I was so, I'll keep my language, mad because I got hit on a Friday practice, and I broke my hand. I broke my hand, and I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back. And this guy Dennis Lauterbach hit me, and he broke my hand, and we didn't even have any pads on, and I'm not staying at this place anymore. Well, guess what? The hand ended up not being broken, and I was pretty much told to be quiet, okay, everything, like tough love. It's okay to have tough love too. Calm down, but be quiet, okay, be a man about it, and everything will get better. And it did. And I think, you know, I think a lot of people owe the fact that I stayed at Mount Union on this call after that first month, and I was encouraged to stay there. So where Jay says he doesn't have a time frame or a time, I mean, I think I have I'm not saying I was a man as a freshman, but I think that first month where I was encouraged and had got tough love was a big part of it.
Yeah, I can, you know, just think, I can't think of a moment either, but I know, and even though I didn't have, gosh, I don't know, Jacob's 38. So 33 years old when my first son was born. I have 3 children. That's where I can really think, like, now I'm just not responsible for myself, and even and my wife. I'm responsible for my kids, or my one son when he was born. So, and then just thinking about, like, the things that my dad did with me and my brothers, and just being able to do the same with my kids. You know, like we've mentioned, playing catch or being there for them in every situation that they could be going through. Teaching them the importance of loving others and the Bible and going to church and praying for and for them, and working hard and showing them the work ethic and and loving others. So I really, when I guess mine was when I have the responsibility of other lives. That's really when I can think of that, and then just able to look back at so many examples that my dad and mom did, doing that for my kids, my 2 sons and daughter. So, and I really think about praying for, right? I just know I just read something, and Jay, you still reading that Tony Dungy daily devotional? Did you read that one the other day on June 6th about the wrestling with prayer, and just constantly, my dad says that, his grandmother was a prayer warrior. Well, we have prayer warriors for us too. And what a great example to set for us, for our kids. I know through the grace of God and through the prayer of my parents that I've gotten through some really hard times in this life. And we all know that hard times in this life are going to happen. So, and then just being able to do that and know that they're praying for my kids, and then myself praying for my kids too. It's a great example.
I can't remember a divining point where, all of a sudden you felt like you were a man. I think my dad was the kind of a guy that would kind of give us gradually responsibilities around the house. When as I said, he was a businessman, and then gradually we kind of work into the business aspect, and making boxes, or washing windows or whatever it was, and then gradually getting more responsibility in the home. But I agree with these guys totally, in that I think you really realize you're a man when you have somebody to think about other than yourself. Whether it's your wife, whether it's your kids, whether it's your job, and most of all, whether it's your faith. But that was the guiding point, I think, to as I became what I felt became a man, was when those responsibilities became important. And again, we really stressed with our kids the idea of their faith. Their faith walk was important to them, and hopefully it's still important to them as they mature and pass this on to their children as well.
Well, all 4 of you guys were successful athletes, and now you're successful coaches. In fact, when I was talking to Jay a week or so ago, I asked him the question, so cumulatively, how many championships, conference, state, district, national, do you guys have between you? And it was kind of humorous on my end as he struggled to come up with the answer, and he goes, I don't know, I know it's more than 20, which is unbelievable. But you guys, I know that my kids both played for both Fran and Jay, and so I kind of got a bird's eye view of sort of their approach to coaching. And I know that character formation was probably as important as the X's and O's, as I watched you guys coach my kids. And I suspect that for you, Mike and Nick, that's probably true as well. So, there's a proverb that we read. It's Proverbs 22:6, and it says, train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it. Now, I've always taught that this is not a promise, it's not a guarantee, but a proverb is really something that if you do X and Y, Z is more likely to happen. And so there's no guarantee that our kids are gonna grow up exactly as we've hoped or trained them to grow. But when we do train them, to in this case, to be the man that God has envisioned us to be, or even the young lady that God has envisioned her to be, they are far more likely to follow that path and not turn from it. So guys, from your experiences as an athlete, as a coach, how have you viewed the value of training and practice as a coach and as a father? As far as what do you want to accomplish as you're training your athletes or you're training your kids?
we're all on different levels, you know, and I'm out of football now. Well, I coach midget football now, but we're on different levels, and fundamentals are the same, whether you're coaching a 10-year-old or a 30-year-old. You know, the hard work, I mean, it just a couple different levels there. But I think one thing that we both, all three of us, all four of us actually coach, the way we coach is we coach our athletes that when it is time where a decision has to be made, hopefully we've prepared you to make the right decision. And again, I think that equates really back to manhood and fatherhood and just being a good human being, is that when a decision has to be made, are you going to make the right decision? Now that could be as simple as a quarterback read on a defense, or you know, if that player has good moral compass, you know, look at all the good things that could happen from a decision, whether on the field or off the field. So whether it's us teaching X's and O's and fundamentals or that character trait, what it all comes down to is trust. And if you can build that trust with your athletes, if they trust you, if they trust one another, and you trust them, there's just so many great things that can happen.
I got a story. Before I answer this question, I got a good story. I remember my dad, because my dad coached us all, and I tell this story a lot. So considering I was the only one that actually tackled anyone when we played football, we were playing this team. That's 100% true. We were playing this team in Pioneer, and I remember I was supposed to tackle the pitch guy on a dive option, and I kept tackling the dive guy. I mean, I must have done it 3 straight times. Well, so one of our guys separated his shoulder. And my dad was also our trainer too. So the guy is separated his shoulder. He's laying in the middle of the field in agony pain. And before my dad runs out to see him, boy, I got a talking to in the middle of the field of tongue lashing real quick, okay? Probably puts the kid's shoulder back in the field. I'm like, all right, this is over. Nope, it's not over yet. Made the kid wait in the middle of the field and yelled at me again for tackling the dive guy. Now listen, I think I learned my lesson because later in the game I intercepted a pitch for a touchdown. Remember that? I intercepted, so I went after the pitch guy. So listen, one thing I think I learned is if you're going to get on someone and I think afterwards I got a pat in the back and hey, it's okay. If you're going to get on someone with some tough love, you better follow it up with some positiveness real quick. And I think that's something that, listen, because everyone, at least early days, I probably remember the most of his coaching because I was the oldest and watching him coach the high school football and being there with the Ron Snyders and the Andy Greenleafs and all those guys and Greg Carr. As I remember him yelling at guys and getting on them, and I'm like, oh gosh. And then, but picking them up 2 minutes later, and I think that's something. And he did the same thing to us. Believe me, I think we all have felt the wrath or the Sirianni pinch or whatever, you know, back in the day. But then 2 minutes later, it was a pickup, or if he was really mad at us, maybe 15 minutes later. But I think that's something that I've done as a coach because I'm going to get on my guys and drive them and push them, and sometimes, you know, that's, you know, with tough love and with a little, you know, shooing them out, but then you got to pick them back up, and I think that's something I definitely got from my dad. And you know, that story is a funny story, but also it shows that, you know, if you can take it, you can learn your lesson, you can be good from it. So that's where I'll go with that.
You know, I think about in coaching all the times that a player's told me I've gotten them better as a football player because of what I've taught them fundamentally, or what I've taught them, you know, or something I teach them and that works out, like the quarterback makes the right read and throws a touchdown pass and we high five on the sideline, or you know, a receiver runs a good route, does what we've kind of practiced ad nauseum or discussed ad nauseum, and, you know, makes a great play. He comes off, we hug on the sideline. While those are great, while those are things that are pretty awesome to experience now that we can't do them on the field anymore. Like, so I can't catch a touchdown pass anymore. And so you do it for some of those reasons. You really get excited, and you almost play through your players with those things. While that's awesome, I think about the times where a player says to me, "Man, I didn't know how much you cared, and I appreciate how much you care for me," or "Thank you for being." I have a poster and not a poster. I have an autograph thing from one of my players that said, "Just thanks for showing me that there's good guys, and that you're willing to create relationships, and show me how to follow Christ." Like, those are the things those are more special to me. Or there's another thing in there says, "You work so hard, what a good example for us." Those mean more. While the touchdowns are awesome, and while the touchdowns get you wins and everything like that, the things that are really special is when a player, says that to you. Thanks for being an example, essentially. And those mean a lot. And, I think about I think initially that's why I got into coaching, because, you see, I would think it was so cool, these guys that when I was a little kid, watching them play football or track, and as a little kid, and then they come to your house, these guys that your heroes come to your house, and just to pay respects to their coach. And I'm like, man, that's cool. And that's kind of why I think I got into coaching initially. For example, when, a player would come to the house and thank my dad 10 years later after they played. A hero of mine. Like, these guys that I watched pick off pitches and run for touchdowns. And I just think that's a special moment that I saw my dad have with a lot of players. That's why I wanted to get into coaching. And when then when that happens to you, when those same things, you're doing it the right way when some of your players are saying that to you. And because so many of our players need guidance and need the love from us as well.
Well, when I think back, coaching and parenting and teaching have a lot of similarities. You start at the beginning. You start with the very fundamentals of the game. You instill in them how to practice and what is expected. And the same thing is true as you raise a family. And as they mature through practice and work hard, they end up able to achieve a goal, whatever that is, or whatever level they're going to achieve through that building as it goes through. And I think being a father is the same. You learn so much from your children. You think you get your background and your ideas from your parents, but you learn so much from your own kids as you're growing and maturing with them, that eventually you hope that as they, and I think that they all have, and I know they all have developed good relationship with their family, their wife, and most important, their children, because that's going to be the next generation. And we've been so blessed to be able to do that with our families and do that with our children, to instill in them the work ethic to get better, but also to make sure that they have that compassion and the faith to develop their family as they should.
It's funny listening to you guys talk and about coaching. We all have different styles of coaching, which is really incredible that there's 4 of us here and we all coach. The style is different. I think some people think we're all the same. Mike, you're more like Dad probably than Nick or I. You yell as much as he did, but we just, the message though is the same. The values are the same. All those things are the same, but just the style and how we approach it is just a little bit different. I just find that really kind of cool. Listen to us talk right now. I just think that's great. And us as parents, we still have the same message. We still have the same values. We still have the same, end goal is being a great father, but we probably differ in some things here and there. So I think that's great. There's no right way as far as the approach, but the values and the morals and those are the same. So I just find that really fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool.
Well, I'll add this too. I mean, I'm proud. I think that this can come from our dad too. I'm proud of my child. My oldest child has really taken a stand, both on social media and just her actions on everything that's going on in our country right now in the last couple of weeks with racism and social injustice. And I'm proud of her for that. I really am. I mean, she is mad. So I think she gets that part. She's mad. And that's okay to be a little mad about, and get a little feisty and riled up about something, because I think this generation of young kids, this teenage generation right now, is going to be our leaders, and I see good things in that generation. So I'm proud of her for taking a stand and fighting for something that she really believes in, and she really believes in it. Like I said, she's mad at the direction our country is in right now, and she wants to change it. I'm proud of her for that.
Well, I want to ask just one last question. I'm just going to ask you if you guys can kind of briefly tell me what would you say the ladies who are watching this today as to how they can, what their role really needs to be in helping men become the men that God envisions us to be.
God has blessed my parents with 3 boys. And then he paid them back with 3, what are we on now? 5 granddaughters. So, Mike has 2 daughters. I have 2 daughters and a son, and Nick has a daughter and 2 sons. So, we're experiencing things that we didn't have growing up. But one thing that I think is so important, and I try to stress this to my athletes and even my students, and I talk about this in the classroom. I think one thing that is so important about us as fathers, our sons are going to treat women the way that we treat their mother. So they're watching. Our sons are watching how we interact and how we talk to and how we love their mothers, our wives, and that's something that is going to be modeled for the future. And that is so much pressure. There's so much pressure. On the other side of that, our daughters are going to be expected to be treated the way that we treat their mother. So if they see that repeatedly, they're not going to know any different. So that's even more pressure on us. So I think that just is one thing that is another added responsibility for us. And now having 2 daughters, I look at things much different than I did before. And Mike probably even more so because, Jenna being in college now. I just, they are never going to stand for and be okay with a man treating them wrong. They don't have to deal with that. They don't have to put up with that. And that's just one of the virtues that we're trying to teach them.
One of we have team rules, and the one that is utmost, if you do anything to any female, you're gone, done. There's no tolerance for that. I don't care if she started or she coached, she did. You're done. So that's one thing, that we have implemented in our team. And like Jay said, I mean, I wouldn't mess with my oldest child. She's feisty, she's ornery, she has her own opinions of almost everything, and she's probably strong enough to take any of my players anyway. So I wouldn't mess with her. We've taught her to be open-minded, and I think my wife has a lot to do with that. We've taught her to speak her mind, and she's just a great kid, and she's very stubborn in her ways, but you're not going to push her around, or you're not going to tell her, not tell her what to do, because she listens to authority, but if she disagrees with you, she's gonna tell you that she's gonna fight for what she believes in. And one thing I think, this hasn't come up, and I don't even know if I'm answering the question, but in terms of our mother, I can't remember how many cards that I received over my coaching career, my playing career. I had a rough time in my senior year of high school with my basketball coach. I didn't get along with him. And cards that I received from my mother that had Philippians 4:13 written on it. I mean, card after card after card whenever I was going through a tough time. So, that's something, and when I look at it, it's always her writing on it. So, in terms of, I'll never forget that. That's helped me a lot through my life.
There's no doubt Hallmark in business. No doubt.
What's that?
There's no doubt that mom has kept Hallmark in business, even to this day.
Yeah, everything we've talked about with our dad today, my mom has been there to support and support him in every way and support us in every way. And it's the same. I mean, it's like we don't just have a great male leader in our lives. We have a great female leader in our lives as well, who's always there. I mean, everything we've talked about, it's the same. She's the same. She's there for us. She loves us. She prays for us. She works hard in what she does. She loves us. She loves others. So everything we talked about today goes the same for our mom. She wasn't quite as good playing catch with us. She didn't throw it quite as hard, and she might not have got us better in that, but she was.
In the nose with a grounder.
She do that?
No, Dad whacked and hit me in the nose. Broke my nose.
And then I just think about, my wife, and she, during the fall season, I have a crazy schedule, and she is the leader of our home. The times I can't be here, she's the leader of our home. There's no doubt. And so I'm lucky to have a woman like my wife Brett that can lead also, and to our 3 kids. So and then just thinking about my mom and dad, the values being the same. Not that it's easy, Dad, you would have to say that, or there's all sorts of challenges, but when the values are the same, the parenting together, I believe it makes it so much easier.
Well, first of all, let me clarify that many of these stories that have been told today have been embellished a lot. But when you think about, we're all teachers and coaches, and we deal with young men and women, all the time. But when you think about the time when we get them, they're mature, and we understand that the prime teachers of our children are the children that we coach, are the parents. And primarily, if the dad, like in my situation where I teach all day, and my wife was a teacher as well, but when the kids were young, she was at home with them, and she was the prime teacher of those kids and their values and where they progress to be men. So again, wives and mothers, think about that as your children are growing. You are the prime teacher. You're the prime educator. You're the prime one that sets the examples. Yeah, the kids look at their dads, but you're the one that's going to be with them at home on the home front the majority of the time. So please take that job seriously and raise them up the way they should be.
Well, guys, I can't thank you enough for joining me today and taking time. I know your schedules are crazy right now. We're all living in this kind of weird world where it's Zoom everything, it seems, all the time. And I know you guys are both trying to kind of get your football teams prepared. And Mike, I know you're not sure if you're going to get to play or not, because all that's still up in the air. And frankly, probably Nick, you're in the same situation as far as at least how it's going to happen. But thank you so much. And Fran and Jay, I just really appreciate you guys being here with us today. It's just been a blessing to have you guys and to call you friends. Well, men, we have a will, God's will to obey. We have a woman to love, and we have a work to do. And as we do these things, we are called to take responsibility, to forsake passivity, and lead our families courageously into the reward that God has planned for you and them. And you may or may not have the opportunity to win a championship like these guys have, or you know, to just be able to coach at the level that they're coaching at. But all of us, every one of us, whatever, you know, frame of life we're in, we can take the small but deliberate steps today to become a champion to our children and to our spouse. And I want to tell you what, that's the eternal reward that God really wants us to pursue. And ladies, God has a great reward for all of us, both men and women, to live a life worth following. Raising children is one of the most humbling and significant responsibilities that we have as adults. And future generations will be blessed if we'll follow Jesus' model of raising kids to reject passivity, accept responsibility, lead courageously, and expect God's greater reward. For those dads and moms with grown children, it's not too late. Even if you've never officially really recognized your children's transition from either being a man into a boy into manhood, or a young girl into womanhood, take some time this week to send a card or have a conversation where you can affirm in specific ways how you've seen them take that important step. And for those dads and moms whose children are still at home, find ways to intentionally teach them these noble character traits. And when you see these traits become a part of their character, plan a special family ceremony to honor their transition from a boy into a manhood, or from a girl into womanhood. You might be surprised at how meaningful and impactful that ceremony will have in preparing your children, not only for their adult life, but for them as potential future parents as well. Thanks for joining us today. Would you pray with me? God, I am just so grateful to have friends like the Siriannis who have really modeled very well what it means to live a life that honors you, and how they have taught their students, their athletes, and their children how to honor you as well. So Lord, as we take these steps, and some of us have maybe taken some of these steps already, and wherever we're at in this journey, I pray that our hearts would be opened, that our spirits would be awakened to lead our families in a way that points them to you and honors you. And I pray this in your name. Amen.